When it comes to abortions, the real debate is about rights and who has them, and if a fetus and an unborn baby classify as an individual human being with fully fledged rights. So why is this so important? What happens when we forcefully deprive women of this right to abort? Where does this lead? What are the consequences of this logically and causally? What are we actually saying when we say that a woman doesn't have the right to abort? So what I'm going to be doing right now is reading out a Facebook post I recently made, which sparked a lot of controversy in this department, and I want to make this video to add further clarification to my position, which is of pro-life, which is to be pro-abortion, pro-reason, pro-reality, pro-good, pro-morality. And I want to explain how I've logically, rationally come to this conclusion. This is for those people who believe they are pro-life but support anti-abortion. And I want to explain from a logical, rational point of view how you may mistakenly believe that to be anti-abortion is to be pro-life, but I want to demonstrate through my argument that it's actually not so and it's the opposite, and to show what the consequences of holding that position actually are. So I'm going to read out my Facebook post, and then I'm going to be going into quite a few different scenarios of women who need abortions, and I want to be asking you if you think they should be allowed to get abortions in each of these examples or not, and then we will go into the effect that this has on rights. And before I continue, I want to make this statement. Please watch the entire video through to the end so you can make your own informed, independent, rational judgment on what I'm actually saying. And then if at the end you want to present your own logical argument why you disagree and oppose my view here, I'll be more than happy to see you express your views in the comments. But if there's going to be any ad hominems, meaning any kind of insult slinging, please, for your own time, don't waste it. It doesn't affect me whatsoever. I read an insult, it's just a waste of my time, it's a waste of your time. There's no point, but I'm open to hearing rational, respectful arguments either way. So the Facebook post was, to be pro-abortion is to be pro-life and pro-rights. The rights and life of the mother are the actual and cannot be sacrificed to the potential, which is the fetus. Until a baby is born, it is not a living human and has no rights. Potential is not actual. It is irrational and immoral to sacrifice the living to the unborn. If a woman does not wish to have a child, it is her right to abort it. What good would it do her or the world to force her to birth an unwanted child? It would be a great evil to force her to bear a burden she rejects. It is her body and her choice. Until the baby is born, the fetus is not an actual individual being. It is in the form of a parasite. It is parasitic as it cannot survive without her, the host. It is a potential being. To be pro-abortion is to be pro-life. And then I've said Harry's explanation covers this in detail. Harry Binswanger, objectivist, which updated my opinion and view on this, and I changed my mind about a couple things, and that's the stance I have today. Let's look at these following scenarios. Imagine Sue. Sue's 10 years old, and she's raped by her dad. Horrible, obviously. Her mum finds out, calls the police, gets a divorce from her husband, and they move away. But still, Sue is pregnant. She's 10 years old and her dad's raped her. Terrible situation. It doesn't happen often, I hope, but it's still a possibility and it can still happen. Do you think Sue, in this situation, has the right to an abortion? Okay, next scenario. Let's say Fiona, who's 30 years old. She goes out to a bar and she gets date raped. Someone puts a pill in her drink, knocks her out, or it severely disrupts her mental acuity, or she gets drunk, a situation like that, and she's basically unconscious, and a stranger or the guy she just met at the bar takes her back to his place, effectively rapes her because she's unconscious or she's drugged out of her mind, and gets her pregnant. And She wakes up the next day, finds out she's pregnant, okay, and she wants to get an abortion as soon as possible because she was date raped, okay? Asking you now, does she have the right to an abortion? Fiona, who's 30, who was raped, does she have the right to an abortion? Next scenario, Harry and Camilla are both 17 and they have sex. They use a condom, but it breaks and Camilla gets pregnant. She's still in year 11 at school and has hardly begun her life. They both didn't plan to have a baby and they took precautions. They had a condom, but it broke. This happens. He was very vigorous. They both don't want and cannot afford to raise a child. So do you think it should be illegal for her to get an abortion in this situation? The next situation is Stephen and Callie, and they're both in their early 30s. And mind you, I've fabricated all these arguments, but I'm sure if you look out in the real world, you can find definitely similar cases. Steve and Callie are in their 30s. Callie is on the pill, but for whatever reason, it doesn't work this time, and she accidentally gets pregnant. They both earn very little money and are struggling financially. They can't afford to raise a child and they really don't want kids. Thus, that's why Callie was on the pill. Do you believe it is right to prevent Callie from having an abortion in this situation? Next, Taylor and Ben are in their 20s and they hadn't been using condoms or the pill because they both don't approve of the potentially toxic side effects of the latex being inside her and on his penis. They think potentially there's some kind of toxic effects that could happen from the condom, whether they're right or not, that's what they believe. And I mean, there is plenty of evidence to show, from what I've heard, of the women who have taken the pill, it can make you quite sick. And so they don't want those potentially side effects. So they had been trying to sync up and have their sex with Taylor's cycle of her periods to ejaculate when she's not going to get pregnant. And it's been working for a long time. It's been working for months in this example. But one time they make a mistake or her period is out of sync to what it normally is, whatever the situation, and Taylor gets accidentally pregnant. So in this case, they're both mentally and financially stable. In their 20s, they're both holding down good jobs, but they both don't want kids. Do you think it would be okay to stop them forcefully from getting an abortion when they didn't plan to have a baby and they don't want one? Do you think you would have the right to stop them? Okay, the next situation. Pepper and Greg are in their late 30s and they do want to have kids. They plan to have a child and Pepper does get pregnant. Greg is the one who makes all the money in the relationship and they don't have any other close family members or friends. 4 months in, Greg gets into a car crash and dies. Pepper is distraught. She's not only lost her partner, but her source of financial income. She only has a small amount of savings and doesn't want to take government handouts. She doesn't want to get on Centrelink or welfare, as she is opposed to the whole idea of taxation and believes it is a moral theft. Without any family or friends, and with her partner Greg now dead, she knows she can't look after a baby by herself. She feels she would be an irresponsible parent, as she is in no place mentally, financially, or emotionally to care for a baby, especially the baby of her now dead husband. She thinks the best course of action is to abort. A doctor tries to talk her out of it, but she is certain and makes up her mind. She feels it would be destructive to her life and the child's if she went through and gave birth. So she decides to abort. In this circumstance, do you believe you would have the right to initiate physical force against her to prevent her from aborting? What would you do? Would you fine her? So you need to pay this $1,000 fine, $10,000 fine. What if she couldn't afford to pay this fine? Since her husband has died and she's looking for work, she's trying to support herself. Or what if she refused to pay the fine because she didn't recognize your authority to issue such a fine? What would you do then? Would you support armed men, police going into her home, breaking down her door and dragging her into a prison cell because you believe it should be illegal to perform an abortion, and she has in this circumstance? Is that what you're saying? Because in effect, that is the cause and effect of what you're saying. If you're saying it should be illegal to abort, and then in a case where someone does abort, you are saying it, because what's the point of illegal if there's no punishment, if there's no threat of force afterwards? That's what you're saying. Would you personally support armed men breaking down her door and dragging her into a prison cell to lock her up and torture her? Because what else is imprisonment apart from torture? If you were the police officer that went to arrest her and lock her in a cage, and she resisted arrest, and she decided to exercise her right to self-defense, which she does have the right to defend herself, do you think you would have the moral high ground when you shoot her dead? I have to ask these tough questions because these are the logical consequences of your actions. If you're supporting anti-abortion, that's what it comes down to. Now let's take the same situation and alter it slightly. What if Pepper had also been in the car with Greg when he crashed, and instead of 4 months pregnant, she was 8 months pregnant? In this example, Greg still dies and Fiona survives, but she suffers catastrophic damage to her legs and needs them both amputated. Though the unborn baby has survived unharmed, she knows it is a much more developed fetus now at 8 months, far more developed, obviously, at 8 months compared to 4 months. And she really would like to consider adoption because she knows that she has no way to look after the child. Now her partner is dead. She's got no income. She's an emotional wreck because she's lost her partner, lost the income to support herself, doesn't believe in government welfare, is in a wheelchair now, just suffered a terrible catastrophe. And of course, these situations aren't common. They're rare, but they can and do happen. And she has no friends who are willing to adopt the child, and she has no trust in the government-run adoption centres. She has heard some horrible stories about them and believes it would be an evil act to gift her child to someone who may be part of an evil cult. She doesn't know for sure, but that's not a risk that she wants to take. She's studied these government adoption centres and thinks that they are up to no good. She really doesn't want to abort, but she feels like she doesn't have any other choice. She posts online to find someone decent to adopt, but no one wants it. And every day she waits, she's getting closer to where she's actually going to have to give birth and then fully be responsible for a living, individual, actual life. She knows she can't care for it by herself, and she believes things that are far more terrible than death may happen if she gives her baby, if she gives birth to it and gives it to the local adoption centre. She fears things that are far more terrible than death could happen to the baby that she gave birth to. And she obviously does not want that to happen. And she feels horrible about it, but knows that the best course of action in her terrible situation is going to be to abort the baby, for there's nothing else she can do. If you believe she doesn't have the right to do this, then why wouldn't you personally take the baby from her and look after it? Because a lot of the time people say that they're against abortion, but they would hear a case like this and they wouldn't offer to take the baby from the mother. They say, well, she shouldn't be allowed to abort, but I don't want to take the responsibility of that child. I can't. I've already got 2 kids, 3, 5, 6 kids. I can't take the kid, but she should be forced to have the child that she can't look after and doesn't want to give to people who may do terrible things to it. Things that are far more terrible than simply preventing it from living. So let's look at another example. This is the last scenario we'll look at. Let's take the case of Fiona, and she's 19. She gets pregnant and she wants to keep the baby, but then 7 months in, she changes her mind and she doesn't want to go through the pain of birth, has broken up with her boyfriend and is changing jobs. Does she not have the right to abort? Just because she's changed her mind? What good is it going to do her or the baby to force her into having it when she doesn't want it? How could that be beneficial to the child to be raised by a single mother, in this example, if she hasn't got a partner, by a single mother who doesn't want it? Or even a mother and a father who both don't want it. And let's say Fiona finds a doctor who will do the abortion and it happens, right? Okay, it's happened, it's done. But then 6 months later, it happens for a second time. She gets pregnant again. Well, if you were the doctor, what are you going to say? You know, once, okay, fair enough and understandable, but twice in 6 months? Come on, Fiona. Close your legs. What are you doing? Use a condom. Use some kind of contraception. Be more careful. What are you doing? Twice in 6 months? Seriously. The doctor, of course, has the right to refuse to perform the abortion. Just because a woman has the right to get an abortion doesn't mean she has the right to force any doctor to do it for her. No, the doctor, of course, has to consent to this. Can't hold a gun to his head and make him do it. But if you were the doctor, would you refuse? If you told her that she would have to go through with a birth this time to learn that her actions have consequences, would you be in the right? Something to consider. And it's also something to consider what are going to be the result of your actions. What are the consequences of refusing to perform the abortion for Fiona? Well, let's look at the case. Fiona, she doesn't want to have the child. She isn't financially or even mentally stable, and she's still only 19. Would you refuse to help and bring a life into the world to be raised by a woman who is not fit to be a mother? What would this say about you if you decided to choose that course of action and say, no, I'm not going to help you and perform the abortion? You need, and let's say there's no other doctor she can go to, and so she can't perform the abortion herself, so she's forced to have the child, and then this child is born into a life with a mother that doesn't love the kid, that doesn't want the kid, that isn't going to treat the kid well. And I see this all too often, all the time. I mean, just walking down the street, sometimes I see parents and I can tell they're just terrible parents because they hit their kids in public. And I find it despicable. The first time I saw that, I was in court actually, and this man, he hit his child on the butt, who was maybe 3, 4 or 5 years old, too young. Well, is there any age where that's acceptable? I don't think so. And I was blown away. I couldn't believe what he was doing in a courthouse. I was waiting in the lobby. I didn't say anything because I was still thinking it over. And then after that moment, I decided if I ever see something like that again, I have to say something. I can't just walk by and not say something. I have to say something. And so that happened to me again when I was in Podgorica, the capital city of Montenegro, actually. I was just walking down the street and I saw a mother and father with a small child, 5 years old, something like that. And the child was, not happy about something, upset about something, as kids are. And so the dad has just leant down, bang, 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 smack her on the butt. And I had to I didn't step in, but I just said, "Hey, what the hell are you doing? You don't do that. That is unacceptable behavior." And they both looked at me like, "Whoa, oh shit, we didn't think anyone would say something like that, but I can't stand that." And it's like, I think that's horrible to bring. And those parents probably wanted their children. They probably wanted us to come in, and they're still physically abusing their children in public. Imagine what happens behind closed doors. I think it's atrocious, let alone bringing into the world a life that's unwanted. What way are they going to be treated at home by someone who is mentally unstable, financially unstable? Who knows if she's doing drugs and sleeping around with a different person every night? Oh, give her the abortion, prevent that life from coming into the world. Because this moves into the idea of the value of human life. Like, do you think that life is intrinsically valuable? Intrinsically as in, no matter what, that life is valuable and worth living, no matter the situation. Even if, for instance, someone's life was a living hell, consisting of rape and torture, like being cut and whipped every single day from birth to their eventual death at the age 15. Do you think life is still valuable then? That person's life would be worth living just to experience being raped as a baby and tortured every day up for 15 years straight? Because that is the mindset of someone who views life as just intrinsically valuable. Valuable no matter what, even if in the Christian version of hell being tortured by devils for eternity. Because that's the perspective, and that's not the perspective of life and the value of life I have. I don't just think it's a wrong perspective on life, I think it is an absolutely pure evil perspective that probably doesn't come from conscious understanding, but evasive, mistaken, accidental misunderstanding. Because if you had the power to prevent a soul or a spirit or a human being, whatever you want to call it, from being born and experiencing 15 years of agony in that specific situation, let's just keep it to that situation right now, would you? Because I bloody hell know I would. I would prevent that life from experiencing cruel torture, because that is the morally right thing to do, to prevent evil from occurring. And what about in more, well, I've heard stories of where that actually does happen, from these children who have been satanically, ritually abused, and all sorts of terrible things happen, which we won't go into. But let's make it less extreme, still some tough situations. But what if someone's born into slavery, born literally inside a prison cell, or inside a group of people who are enslaved, they're imprisoned, they're born into servitude? Is life still valuable to live then, when you're a slave? What about born into poverty and disease, living on the streets, sickness, malnourished? What about abuse and torture that they couldn't escape? Is life still valuable then? Like, what is the point of life if you can't live it freely and happily? What is the point of life if you are controlled by others via physical force or by induced terror? What is the real value of life if it can't be lived and is not respected, but actively and passionately disrespected? Wouldn't you now say that life isn't intrinsically valuable? Because really, what life is, it's objectively valuable. It's not intrinsically valuable, it is objectively, not subjectively, not mystically, not according to God, but it is objectively valuable. And wouldn't you prefer to say that? Because it makes more sense that life is only valuable when the freedom to pursue one's values is respected. When one is able to pursue and experience happiness. Only then, when one is free to live as a rational human being, is life actually valuable. Because if you have your consent violated by people who believe they have the right to initiate physical force against you, then how could you argue that you are free to live in this world? If your very means of living, that which is your ability to exercise your reason, that is our method of survival, if that's threatened by others, then by what standard are you measuring the value of life? If you aren't measuring the value of life by your ability to live rationally and freely and to be happy, then by what metric do you use? And so I share this to try and change your point of view from that of life as intrinsically valuable, which just isn't true objectively, to that of objectively valuable. Life is only valuable when you have the ability to live it properly, because there is a proper way to live and an improper way, which you'd need to listen to a whole series of lectures on philosophy to fully grasp that. So I know I can say that, but you're not fully going to understand unless you decide to study this topic in much greater depth, but I still need to say it. Because if you support one case of initiating physical force against another, you indirectly and implicitly support all cases of initiating physical force. So if you're anti-abortion, that's what you're doing. Because either you support the objective fact that we have individual human rights, or you oppose them. You're either totally for them or totally against them. If you allow one chink in your armor, if you open the gate to one situation where you have the right to do what you really don't, then the whole castle crumbles. It's like with Troy. They opened the gate, they allowed the Trojan horse to come in, they thought nothing of it because they weren't thinking properly, and they all got slaughtered. It was destroyed from the inside out. Because there are only individual rights, not group rights, not collective, social, society rights, country rights, national rights. No, there's no trans rights, there's no gay rights, there's no fetus rights or sperm rights. There's only individual human rights. And because of that, an unborn baby does not qualify as an individual and thus does not have rights. Individual rights are simple. Provided you are an individual, living human being, you have rights as per the nature of your objective identity. Your rights are equal to everyone else's. Wealth, power, and intelligence make no difference because metaphysically, the way things actually are, we are the same species and we share the same nature. That nature is that we must survive by the use of our reason. Physical force and fraud, which is intellectual force, are the only powers which can inhibit or prohibit our use of reason and thus our proper survival. And quickly, proper survival is the freedom to consciously choose and experience your values, specifically the pursuit and achievement of health and happiness. That is what proper survival is. And to make it really simple in your mind to remember, proper survival means to be happy. And to be happy, to break that down very simply, it's a non-contradictory state of joy. So you can't be happy being a drunk by avoiding the facts of reality, by slicing your wrists or injecting heroin because it's causing contradictions. Happiness is a non-contradictory state of existing in reality according to the nature of your identity as a human being, which must use reason as its method of survival. You can't be happy via faith, by using faith. You can only be happy using reason because that's your nature and identity as a being. You can try and circumnavigate that. You can ignore reality, but you can't ignore the consequences of ignoring reality. The people who say they are pro-life, which is a noble stance, I do understand your point of view, they say they support the protection of life, but unfortunately in their quest to protect life, they assault the freedom and rights of the actually living, whilst crusading for the unborn potential. They have mistakenly sided not with life, but the unborn. They believe they are taking a pro-life stance, but as a matter of fact, by demanding abortion be illegal, they have supported an anti-life, anti-rights stance. In effect, by saying that abortion should be illegal, they are saying that they believe it is right, moral, and proper to punish those women who do have an abortion, no matter the circumstances of their abortion. And what would that punishment consist of? Anything from a fine to murder to torture, as per the examples I gave earlier. These are the possible effects that arise from the cause of preventing abortions. Because if a woman needs an abortion, she's going to get one, whether you like it or not. It's like if someone really wants a gun, even if they're illegal, someone will find a gun. If someone really wants cocaine or some other drugs, even though they're illegal, they'll find them, they'll get them. So in reality, when someone says they support the banning of abortion, they're saying they support the violation of individual rights, including their own. And it's opening the floodgates to breaches of rights in every aspect of life. And this is so important. This is why I'm making this video, because I am a champion of individual human rights. I am the greatest defender of rights. That is what I do. That is what I'm about, supporting your rights, because when I support your rights, I'm supporting my rights, because I don't want my rights violated. And if other people out there think they have the right to violate other people's rights, even a woman I don't know and I may not even like, and I may totally disapprove morally of what she's doing, but she still has the right to do this. But as soon as you support the initiation of physical force against her, you're supporting it against me, you're supporting that against yourself. And I don't want to live in a world like that. I don't think it's worth living in a world like that where people believe they have the right to initiate physical force. That's when you end up with these totalitarian, draconian systems of taxation, and the list goes on, and I'll give some more examples soon. When you support the idea that humans should be tortured, which is to be imprisoned, because what else is imprisonment today apart from torture? For exercising their rights, you have sanctioned and fully supported the violation of your own rights. The initiation of physical force, it is evil. Retaliatory force, on the other hand, that is not evil. That is the moral good. But you really clearly need to understand the difference between initiation and retaliation. And I do understand on this topic, it can be difficult to understand, thus the necessity for this video. There are other people who have spoken about this, and if you are really interested in the topic, do more research and listen to both sides of the argument, as always. Some people think it counts as the initiation of force to abort an unborn baby. But really, how could it if it hasn't been born and does not yet have individual rights? Because it's not an individual at that point. It's still a parasite. It has to be a parasite. It's connected to the mother, who is the host by the umbilical cord. Its heart may be beating, but so may a dead man who has an electrical system plugged into him to pump his heart. Having a beating heart, it's not sufficient enough to classify something as an individual living human with rights. And some people believe that science says that a soul enters the fetus at conception. Well, okay. Well, what if science showed that each egg and sperm cell already had souls? Should it be illegal to have periods without getting pregnant? Or what about male masturbation and ejaculation? Should that be illegal as well? No, some people would say that's ridiculous, that's taking it too far. Obviously, sperm and eggs, they're not living human beings with rights. There's a clear distinction between sperm on a tissue compared to a baby and me and you. There's a clear, obvious, perceptual difference. Even a child, a 3-year-old, can understand the difference. Looks at ejaculation on a tissue, looks at me and you, and can't comprehend how you think they're in the same category. And yes, I would agree with that. Sperm and eggs cannot be classified as human beings because they aren't. They are the ingredients that start the growth process. But potential is not yet actual. An acorn is not an oak tree. An oak tree is not an acorn. A fetus is not a birthed child. An individual baby which has been born is not a fetus. So what is the difference between a baby which has been born and had its umbilical cord cut and a baby still in the womb, apart from those explicitly obvious differences? Well, a baby which has been born is able to breathe on its own. A baby in the womb, it cannot. And that's a huge difference. And not only breathe, but digest, eat, and behave like a human being behaves. Nature has provided the clear and obvious dividing line for us. Reality is the ultimate arbiter between actual individual human rights and life and the potential yet to be human being. One is actual, the born baby, and the other is potential, the unborn baby. What's the dividing line? In the womb, can't see it. It's been born, out of the womb, can see it. Simple. It really is as simple as that. And people can counter, well, what about the case of the man who is in a car crash and then needs to be on a ventilator? He can't breathe on his own. Do you have the right to kill him? Well, in that circumstance, he obviously is a man, has been living and breathing, and then an unfortunate catastrophe strikes him. He has an accident, and then he needs a machine to assist him. Well, you don't no one has an obligation to help that man. No one is obliged. Like, you can't physically force anyone to help that man. Do I think it's right to help him? Yes, of course, provided he wants to be helped and it wasn't a deliberate thing, he was trying to commit suicide or something, he actually wanted to die. But if he wanted to live, had a relatively normal life, and there was the ability and opportunity to put him onto a ventilation to help him breathe and to recover and get better, I think that's the right thing to do. There needs to be some process how that actually works, but there is a big difference between that situation and an unborn baby in the womb, and even compared to a baby that's just been born. So I don't think that's a good example to throw in here, and I just only mention that because I know some people would throw that in there. And if you say that a mother has no right to abort the unborn baby, then in effect you've said that she has no rights, which is saying that you don't have rights because you are saying you don't believe in the objective concept and fact that humans have rights. So what are rights? Very quickly, rights are actions which humankind is required to take in the pursuit of proper survival. And the actions one can take are unlimited, provided they cause no imposition to others' rights. Framed in another way, rights are conditions of existence necessary for proper survival. Framed in another way, we all have the right to perform any action provided it does not cause imposition. For more detail, watch my video about rights and explaining proper survival. The link will be in the description below. So if you don't support rights, then what are you supporting? Consequentially, whether you're conscious of this or not. The fact is, you're supporting the notion that humans are slaves to whomever holds the most power. You may deny this and reject this idea as ridiculous, which if you don't have the full knowledge and you haven't studied this professionally for years like I have, it is understandable how you can be opposed to such a statement, just offhanded. I do understand this. But in actuality, it is what you are condoning. When the government says you must wear a mask to protect yourself and others, you have forfeited your rights when you argue that a woman doesn't have the right to abort. The same is true when the government says you must get jabbed. Careful with that word, that's a trigger word. The same is when they say you must pay taxes, GST, capital gains tax, council rates, registration, license fees, everything else you don't consent and agree to, petrol tax. When you can't leave your home, you must scan QR codes to go to the bloody cinemas, that there's a curfew, you can't leave past 9 p.m, you can't drive on the streets, you can't live. It's just you are enslaved because you have forfeited your rights. You have given up your right to live because you have supported the violation of others' rights. And whenever you do that, you support the violation, whether explicitly or implicitly, of your own rights. It's unescapable. It's inevitable. That's what you're doing. If you support the violation of someone else's rights in just one department, say anti-abortion, you support the violation of your own rights in all departments. It's unavoidable. It's all or nothing. Because when you either directly or indirectly violate or support the violation of another's rights through the initiation of physical or intellectual force, which is fraud, then you forfeit your own rights. And that's the way it is. You can kick and scream and cry and wish that it's not so and stamp your feet and say it's not like that, but it is. Just like when someone murders, they have forfeited their rights. They can now be rightfully imprisoned and kept segregated from the rest of society to prevent them from murdering other innocent people. Although I don't support the idea of revenge and torture, which is the current imprisonment system, I support the system of rehab and remedy, rehabilitation. And I have a full video dedicated to this on my channel. I can also put the link to that in the description. If you support the forfeiture of another's rights, you automatically support the forfeiture of your own. And this is why I am a champion of rights, because I don't want my rights violated. That's why I study what are rights, how are they applicable in each single circumstance, how can I defend your rights. Even when you sling insults and want me to burn on the stake, I still need to defend your rights, because in the act of doing that, I am defending my rights. By protecting the right to abort, you protect rights and are protecting and taking a pro-life, pro-rights standpoint. You cannot sacrifice the living to the non-living morally. It is an immoral standpoint to take the side of an unborn over the born. So what about an extreme case? For instance, say there's a business where mothers are paid a large sum of money to get pregnant and then abort their babies to sell the body parts, and they did this on a consistent basis as a practice. I mean, I'd find it quite repulsive, but if they wish to do that to their bodies and are not being forced under the threat of violence into getting pregnant, and they're being paid $100,000, $1 million for each time they get pregnant, 7 months, the baby is aborted, and then they're selling the body parts or they're doing something with it, it's still their right to do so. And just because someone has the right to do something, it does not mean it is automatically moral. For instance, we have the right to use drugs, slice our wrists, smoke, get drunk, inject steroids, heroin, or worse into our bodies, and it's our right to do so. But just because we have the right to do those things, it doesn't make those harmful actions moral nor right. We don't have the right to control how others use their body, provided they are not committing harm against other living individual human beings. And if you find abortion disgusting and immoral, then it's your right to feel and think that way. You have the right to shun and ostracize those who do abort. Doctors have the right to refuse to assist in abortions if they don't wish to help. You have the right to adopt an unwanted baby and to raise it yourself. But you don't have the right to use the power of law to harm those who support abortions. And of course, you don't have the right to harm a baby that's been born. I find the practice of smacking the newly born baby to test its crying response. You can watch these videos on YouTube. Or if you're a mother who's had birth to a child at hospital, you've probably seen this firsthand. I find that practice and sticking needles into it, sticking a piece of metal into the flesh of a baby that's just been born and injecting toxins, putting it on cold scales to weigh it. It's been in the nice warm womb and then on these cold metal scales, and taking it from the mother so the mother doesn't have enough time and it's put into some incubator. I find those despicable, horrible practices. And I think those practices should be illegal, as they are the initiation of physical force upon a human being who is unable to defend itself, who is vulnerable. Like smacking a just born child to test its reactions is a pathetic excuse for ritualistic child abuse and traumatization. I think that is evil to do that. There is a right way to live and a wrong way. And the right way is the way of reason, objectivity, and adherence to the facts. And the fact is, we have individual human rights. If you support the violation of human rights by taking an anti-abortion stance, then unfortunately it is a fact that you are taking the stance of anti-life, anti-reality, and anti-reason. If you wish to protect life, actual life of others and of your own, then you must support abortion. So I was going to continue this video and go onto my Facebook page to look at the post I made about abortion and read through some of my comments, but currently there's 242 comments on the post, maybe a half or a third of them are mine. If you want to get more detail about this and see some of my responses, you can go through that post and check it out yourself. I won't be including that into the video. And I just wanted to point out, I find it a little bit surprising, but more disheartening and disappointing that I think there was only one person so far out of the many, many people that commented that actually asked for, perhaps maybe two people that asked for more explanation on my point. Most people either just supported me directly, okay, that's great, the tiny majority, or was just ad hominems just saying, you're disgusting, you're pathetic, and they're not understanding. I am protecting your rights. And that is not the way to argue by slinging ridiculous insults. What good does that do you? I mean, it does nothing to me. I don't care. I think it's good character building because, as David Icke says, it just bounces off. It's water off a duck's back. But what good does that do you? How do you look at yourself when you can't even formulate a logical, rational, respectful, grammatically correct argument and you need to just go name calling? It's not in your interests. And I'm here to help. I want to help you become the best version of yourself, to be reasonable, to be objective, to be as free, to be as wealthy as possible, to be as happy as possible. Why? Because I know when you have a better life, it's going to affect my life. I will have a better life. The more people out there that have better quality of lives, that are free, that respect their own rights and other people's rights, that are happy, the better my world is going to become. That's why I do this. And I think it's very important to talk to people, even though it's just on Facebook. Just be honourable. Just be reasonable. There's no need for all the insults. It just doesn't do you any good. Now, I have to ask this question. Is it better to prevent the pregnancy or to get an abortion? Obviously, it is better, of course, to prevent that pregnancy than to have an abortion. The next question is, what's better? Is it better, if she does get pregnant, to abort as early as possible or as late as possible? And it's a no-brainer, to abort as early as possible. And the point here, be careful. Take precautions. Be as careful as possible. Prevention is always better than correction. And I want to touch on the point of viability. If the unborn baby is viable, meaning you could take it out of the womb and it could survive individually by itself, well, why is that not considered in the same category, the same classification as a born baby? If you could remove this 8-month gestated fetus potential baby, remove it and it is able to survive on its own as a normal baby would, why isn't that the same? Simply because it hasn't been born yet. There needs to be an objective, identifiable, undeniable, incontestable dividing line, and that line is obviously birth. That's when there is that clear natural distinction between, okay, this is now an individual actual being. It is outside of the womb. When it is inside the womb, it is inside the womb. It's still connected to the mother. We need some kind of objective, repeatable standard that is infallible. It's just the same all the time. That's where rights must be based from. Now, is it understandable why many doctors may refuse to abort an unborn baby that is beyond, say, the 6-month mark, where it would be viable, except in serious circumstances like the original ones I presented earlier? Is it understandable why these doctors may refuse beyond 6 months? And yes, I think it is very understandable why many of them would refuse to assist in the abortion. The unborn baby is very nearly an actual baby. If a woman said she wants to abort just because she doesn't feel like having it anymore, for no particular reason, then I can personally understand why some people feel enraged at such childish and irresponsible behavior. If you're not going to take the role of motherhood deadly seriously, then don't get pregnant or have the abortion ASAP, as soon as possible. What is more serious in the world than having a child, than bringing new life into this world? Hardly anything. It is just about the most serious thing anyone can ever do. So it must be taken 100% seriously. The act of bringing new life, a baby, a child, into this world. If you aren't reading and studying on how to be the best mother and father you can possibly be, then I don't think you have any business raising a child. If you aren't researching health, leadership, educational strategies, and investing the same amount of time, energy, and effort into raising a baby as you would in creating $1 billion business, then why are you having a child? Seriously, why? Why? If you aren't going to give it your absolute best, where you can honestly say you did everything possible and known to mankind to raise that child to the peak of your abilities, then why are you having the child? For what purpose? If not to assist them, the child, in living the best life possible they can. We know for a fact so much of what people become later in life depends on the kind of parenting they receive. Having quality parents is so important, not only for the child's life, but because of the impact it has on you, on me, and everyone else in society, in the world. I find it absurd how many parents take the act of becoming a mother and father as a hobby. They think it's a fashion statement, rather than recognizing it as the monumentally crucial nurturing process that it really is. We have the knowledge collectively available to us, how to raise healthy kids, physically and mentally, but most parents don't really seem to give a damn. They invest more time into scrolling social media, getting drunk, smoking, taking drugs, gossiping, watching TV, watching Netflix, than in joining parenting classes or watching videos on YouTube how to be a great mum and dad, or reading books about proper parenting practices. And I'm not saying that this is you. If you are a mother or father watching this, you know as well as I do, many, if not most people, don't take parenting half as seriously as they should. So with this knowledge in mind, if a young girl is consistently getting knocked up and is consistently getting abortions, despite her disgustingly stupid approach to living a rational life, she still has the right to have those abortions. And especially in this case, it is the moral good for her to abort those fetuses. Because what horror would the baby have to endure if this particular irrational, naive fool was to actually keep one of them? Now, I'm not saying that there should be a permit required to have children, but I implore people to take life more seriously. Sometimes I see on social media or on dating apps, girls will write, "I'm looking for a guy who doesn't take life seriously and can just knock me up every 2 months and we can just get abortions constantly." That's one thing they're actually saying in effect. They don't want someone who takes life seriously. What the hell? What's more serious than life itself? Raising another life is one of the most serious things that there are. If you don't take life seriously, you don't take yourself seriously. And that is a fundamental problem. And I also mean it's hard to take yourself seriously if you don't believe you have any rights, and if other people are constantly violating your rights and treating you like their property. That's going to have a hell of an impact on someone's self-esteem when they can't live for themselves. No wonder they go and do all this irrational, foolish, stupid things. So again, I implore people to take life more seriously in all aspects, to rationally judge and independently think for oneself. If you wish to prevent such needless and careless abortions, then you have every right to educate these women. But you have no right to physically assault them. If we are to act human qua human, as in the capacity of humans as we actually are, which is as rational, intelligent, and conceptual self-aware beings, then we must interact via reason, not with violence. If we wish to create order, peace, civility, and sensibility, we will never achieve it by fueling the flames of chaos. Again, if you don't understand how the initiation of physical force is evil and causes chaos, then I suggest you start by watching my video about rights, as I suggested earlier, and you can also check out my playlist I've got dedicated to rights and the plenty of other playlists I've got talking about philosophy and morality, because they all interconnect and provide a very strong framework that supports all these ideas. So when it comes to rights, you either have a right all the time or you don't have it at all. If the right can be retracted at will by subjective conventions of man, then it is not a right but a privilege. And those ideas that humans don't have rights but privileges given by the ruling class is as ancient as it is evil. If you have the right to drink alcohol today, you have that right tomorrow, yesterday, and forever. The same can be said for smoking or using drugs. Imagine if it was illegal to drink alcohol and you'd be locked up or murdered because you exercised your right to consume a beverage or to smoke a cigarette or even to slice your wrists. No matter how horrible that is, you still have the right to do such a thing. If you have a right, you always have a right in the past, present, and future, irregardless of who understands this right or not. The right exists independently as a fact, corresponding to the nature of human beings as living organisms which require the use of reason to properly survive. The fact does not change and cannot change. It is a metaphysically given, not a convention nor creation of man, but discovery. If you agree that rights are permanent and inalienable, meaning they can't be taken away, and anyone that tries is violating your rights. No matter if your rights can be enforced or not, you still have these rights. And if anyone who has the greater might is stripping you of your rights, they're the one who are in the wrong. They're still violating your rights. No matter if you are a little old lady and you can't defend yourself and uphold your rights, or if you are a nation state being attacked by a stronger nation, you have rights. Individual rights. Then you cannot contradict yourself saying that sometimes a woman has the right to abort and sometimes she doesn't. You can't make that statement without being a hypocrite. And whenever you come across a contradiction in your cognition, you know you've made an error, because there aren't contradictions in reality. So the final points are this. For a human being to have rights, it must be an individual. That is, having been born. There does exist rare and extreme circumstances that almost everybody can agree with that warrants an abortion. Rights are total. You either support them in totality as inalienable and permanent, or you don't at all. Some actions may be immoral, but we still have the right to perform them. And the last point, if you wish to prevent nonsensical abortions, like that irrational teen example who was aborting just on a whim, then your option and answer is education, not physical force of law. So I hope you found this video valuable. As I said, if you have some comments, if you want to share something perhaps I haven't considered, because that's possible, then please put it in the comments. If you want to support this idea and support the protection of human individual rights, do what you shall. Do what you need to do. Yeah, so I'll see you on the next video, and I highly recommend checking those other links in the description to get more understanding of my viewpoints on rights, because it is a big topic and you don't really understand a concept until you know how to apply it, and you don't understand how someone is championing or fighting for this concept of individual rights until you see how they've applied it. And I've got dozens of videos on my channel showing in many different circumstances how I would actually apply rights and morality, objective morality. So I encourage you to watch those videos, and bye-bye for now.